All right. Hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday afternoon. This is Amanda Tainter. I am the coordinator of instructional design at Reedley College. Lori, did you want to introduce yourself?
I am Lori Levine, and I am the person who develops or helps to produce professional development, flex, all of that fun stuff. I'm also your VP of member rights for the union. Just got to put that in. So if you're having an issue, contact me. I'll hand it back over to you, Amanda. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. We're going to talk today about using AI to aesthetically improve Canvas. And here's my big disclaimer. This is not going to save you any time. In fact, this is going to make your prep be at least twice as long. And I say that because it's so much fun and it becomes so interesting to be able to do all of these things that you go down all these rabbit trails. So that is my hashtag, my asterisks, because it will take you so much longer to prep, but hopefully it'll be a little bit more fun to create these aesthetically pleasing pages. And I just want it because when people come back to me and say, it took me so much longer because now I have to do all these things. Well, I warned you, but it is a lot of fun. So if you're here to think you're going to save time in your prep, that's not what this is about. This is about making your Canvas courses look so much more aesthetically pleasing. And that really does make a difference in how we're prepping. And it's a fun sort of time. So I that's not a doom and gloom kind of prediction of the presentation. Hopefully, as you explore, you'll start having a lot of fun. But I'd like to do that disclaimer. Okay, so let's get started. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be going through a lot of different screens. So if I start talking about something and it hasn't switched over to share, please let me know. I've tried to make sure I reshare and share, but sometimes it doesn't quite do what I want it to do. So please don't hesitate to interrupt me and say, I don't think we're looking at what you are talking about. All right. So we can use AI to really transform the visual appeal of our Canvas course. It can instantly transform even the most basic content into something that is more aesthetically pleasing. One of the great things, and we're not going to dive deep into this part today because I don't want it to be overwhelming, but maybe we can talk about it in a future presentation, is creating custom illustrations. And that's another thing that AI can do really well, especially graphical representations of concepts. And then just make everything that you create aesthetically fully accessible. That's one of the things I've really appreciated in my use of AI to create those aesthetics is that if I'm very clear that this needs to be screen reader accessible, it does a really great job of making that so. I always still run both the Canvas native accessibility checker and the Pope Tech accessibility checker, but it's been really spot on creating accessible content as long as I'm doing making it very clear to the AI that that's what is important to me. So that'll be something to remember once you start your engineering. The first thing before you even dive into playing with this in your course is you want to figure out what visual theme you want to use for your class. And this is along the lines of the color theme. If it doesn't matter at all, then make sure that you firm that up in your brain and saying, I can just have whatever type of colors I want all over my class. But you really want to figure out if you do care and you want a cohesive look to your class, what is the color theme that I want to apply? Because this is really going to dictate all of the other parts that you're going to apply in that aesthetic. So you need to be able to figure that out and then give it to the AI. So selecting a consistent color palette, I love to go to different HTML or hex code generators, and I'll show you what that means in just a second to find the palette that I like. I'm not an interior designer. I clash all the time. I can't make colors go together. So I certainly will never take that on myself. So I just go and I type into Google either color picker or hex code or anything like that, or color palette. Any of those terms will give you what you are looking for. So this one is just Adobe or color.adobe.com, create a color wheel. But as long as you go to color.adobe.com, it's going to give you all of these different options. And you can play around here and figure out what kind of colors that you like, the complement colors. So if you watching me move this wheel around, I enjoy doing the color wheel because gives me a spectrum of colors that then I can plug into the AI to create those templates. All of this will make a lot more sense in just a couple of minutes once I show you the creation of the templates. But it really is important that you start at this level, because if you don't, then you're going to get halfway through and your colors are going to start changing and morphing. And you'll have a whole bunch of different shades of green versus just figuring out, okay, at the beginning, I want to have a green theme, and this is the colors that I'm going to use. Whatever software that you use, what you want to get is what's called the hex codes. And the hex codes are, it changes when I go over that. I'm sharing Adobe Color, right? Okay, so the hex codes are what is right here on the bottom, and it has that little hashtag and then a series of letters and numbers.
Amanda, it's really tiny though.
Oh, yep. Thank you. Is that better?
Yeah, yeah, way better.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, perfect. So a hex code is going to be a series, a hashtag, and then a series of numbers and letters. And that is what allows wherever you're plugging that hex code in to duplicate the exact shade that you want. So what I like to do is I mess around in here and I find the exact shades that I would like to use. Now, I've done it before where I've found a lighter shade and a darker shade and then asked AI to fill into that, because I like doing gradients in my course. And I'll show you, I'll have visuals of all of these things. I'm just laying those foundations. So you can start with that if you want. So say I want this to be at my lower spectrum and that at my higher spectrum. It doesn't really match to me. But cut and paste those into some sort of um, uh, platform, Microsoft Word. I like using Microsoft Notepad. Uh, I struggled in putting this presentation together because there's a fair amount of techie kind of language, and I don't want to overwhelm you. But Notepad, if you just type into your search bar Notepad on your computer, it's much better than Microsoft Word because it won't add any extra coding. So I highly recommend pasting the HTML into Notepad versus Microsoft Word. But if you want to start with Microsoft Word, you should be fine. I just wanted to have that little disclaimer. If you come back and say, this added all sorts of stuff you didn't tell me, I told you, but it can be more technical. So that's the first thing that I'll do is I will take whatever hex code I want to start with and then put that onto Notepad. Okay. Any questions? And having to switch back and forth is going to be perfect because it'll give time for people to ask questions.
Yeah,
Any questions so far?
I
Yep.
use sticky notes a lot of the time when I'm cutting and pasting codes because I have different. Is that okay, or are there issues with that?
Yeah, as long as you haven't experienced any issues. I haven't used it before, so
No.
as long as you haven't experienced any issues, then I would say, yeah.
Yeah.
I do like the notepad because I save my codes for all the different classes that I have. So as long as you can do something like that, and I'll show you with the templates, whatever system works good for you, absolutely. So here we go. Select a consistent color in child development. For Reedley College, infant toddler has always been purple. And so when I show you that class in a second, it looks like purple threw up everywhere. And that's just what color we chose for the aprons. And so in my brain, infant toddler is always purple. And so that made it easy to choose the theme for that. And you'll see the color theme in the different courses that I teach as we use those for an example. So visually also for you, it can help remind you, oh, this is the class that I'm in right away. Now, if you teach multiple sections of the same course, that's on you to try and figure that part out. All right. So here are some samples of what it might look like to have different themes. And let me zoom in just a little bit. This is the same page in different classes. So this was my diversity class, and I chose earth tones to represent that course. And then I bet you can't guess what this one is. We got pink and purple that threw up everywhere. So here we have my infant toddler class. And this is the same page in these different courses, just different themes applied to them. And I wanted to be able to show that so you can see just that simple aesthetics, how it changes the course rather dramatically. And then again, the same page applied with a different theme as well. So the colors do make a difference on how you're going to apply it. And you can see some of the different elements in there, and I'll talk about a little bit how those morphed as well in playing with the AI. So does the color theme kind of make sense now as you see it visually? All right. Okay. So after you've defined, okay, here's the color theme that I want. And for that, I recommend choosing a spectrum of 5 hex codes. So you have a darker hex code and a kind of a gradient that goes to a lighter hex code. And that's going to give you some flexibility in that color palette that you want to play around with in creating the different elements that we're going to look at. All right. So the next thing, Tamara, yeah, absolutely. I don't know what context you're talking about as far as applying a color theme to an OER textbook, but if you're integrating it into Canvas, that's all that I teach with is OER. So that's absolutely what I do is I apply that color theme. But if you're writing an OER textbook, go for it. It's your textbook. You can do whatever you want. And if I'm not answering your question correctly on that one, oh, perfect. Sounds like it. Okay. So step one, we had you choose your color theme. Step two, figure out what key elements you're wanting to add the color to. Now, this might be something that you have to play around with it a little bit to figure out all the different key elements you want to do. I'm going to show you the key elements that I've created, and hopefully that will help give you some ideas. But decide what are the levels or what are the things that I want to add these aesthetic touches into my course. When I first started doing this, I started super simple. I messed a whole bunch of stuff up and then I went backwards and decided let's start with a little bit more simple before I keep deleting my entire page. So I started just with headings and I wanted to create just simple aesthetic colored banners on my headings. And so I had different gradient heading banners depending on the heading structure. And that created a visual cue, also using the HTML to create that heading 1, heading 2. But for the aesthetic part of it, I had a heading 2 gradient, a heading 3 gradient, a heading 4 gradient, and you'll be able to see what those looks like. And then the next thing is that I decided to do was, all right, I want to have my objectives have some fun, different aesthetics applied to it. So I created an HTML template for the objectives. And then it was, all right, I would like my images to have some HTML aesthetics. So it's deciding, do I want my text to wrap around my images? Do I want text to wrap left and then right? Do I want to have a certain level padding? The reason it's important to think about these things before you jump into AI is because the more you've thought about it beforehand and you can provide those instructions to it, the less it's going to be creative and reinvent a whole bunch of different things every single time it does it. So by you thinking about this beforehand, you can provide that information into the AI instead of allowing it to just change its mind every single time. So that's why this activity is important to go through before you begin the process. Videos. How do I want my videos to look? Do I want them to just have a box of my theme color around it? Do I want them to be on a color card? Do I want it to have the text wrapped around it? Those are the types of things you'll need to be able to tell the AI before you input the HTML. Call out boxes. Am I going to create call out boxes for definitions, for key points, for quotes, for important information? All of these are the fun things that you get to do when you start messing around with the HTML. Now, you can break a whole lot of things, so we'll talk about that as well. But all those visual elements that you want to put on your Canvas page, start thinking about that. Definitions. Am I going to have a different color for definitions? Think through, and a great way to do this is go onto a web page, or if you have a publisher digital textbook right now, go on there and take a look and see, all right, what are the different visual elements that I'm seeing in this course that I'd like to be able to replicate that will help them stand out? Maybe I want a case study. Maybe I have an embedded activity. All of these things are elements that you can replicate because Canvas allows us to get into that HTML and mess with it. If this is your first time, you've never messed with HTML, you've never done the coding, I would start simple. Just say, I'm going to create a different color banner for each of my headings. You'll save yourself a lot of frustration by just starting simple. You don't need to get all fancy. Just start with that. And then as you become more familiar with messing around in the HTML, you can move on and do these different elements. All right. So step three, decide on what your organizational structure is. How do you want to implement these in your Canvas course? As I mentioned when I was answering Tamara's question, I use open educational resources and other free resources in my course. So everything that my students need access to is all embedded natively into Canvas pages. So they don't rarely do they link out into other things. So even though I use an OER textbook, I cut and I paste all those elements and I put them on a Canvas page. And that allows me to create the structure that I want on that page. So if you're doing a mixture of a video and then another page, you have something else, think about how you want to create that. For me, I've got text, I've got videos, I've got images. I have all of those elements present on a Canvas page. So when I'm thinking about applying this aesthetic theme to that Canvas page, I need to think about how that organizational structure is going to flow before I start messing with the HTML. Any questions so far? And I know this is a lot of words. I'm stalling as I find my water. I know this is a lot of words, and we're going to look at some visuals in just a second. I just want to make sure and lay some foundations. Good to go so far? Okay. Um, so let's look at some examples. We can use AI to create some really cool stuff. And what I found is as I start messing around with it and I see different elements that I like, I make notes of it because AI will get super creative and start creating different elements that you didn't even think to ask it. And I want to be able to replicate that. So once it's created something that I like, I write it down so that when I train it for the next course or for another page that I'm creating, I can ask it to do those elements. So in this example, I had done gradient color heading. So you can see right here, this is where those hex code gradient is what it's created. I had this bottom darker color as that first hex code, and then the top as that second hex code. And when I was training the AI, which we'll get into later, I told it to make a gradient heading. What I didn't tell it to do was to create the border on the top and the bottom. That it morphed into and decided to do that on its own. So I made a note and said, all right, I like that. And I did a lot of my headings in that structure. I'll show you what I do now. So you can see this is just a very simple initial implementation of I just did the heading structure with the HTML there. And then here is just the addition of a call out box. And I have that gradient that's applied in there. All of these things AI will do for you, but it's good to see the different elements. So you see the difference that it makes just adding these very simple elements to how much more aesthetically pleasing that course is. And you can create different gradients within its own um, different call out boxes. When you're starting to train it, you do have to make sure and make this an iterative process. And this is where as I started to use it and I got better at my training, before that, I would just simply cut and paste, and we're going to look at those different elements. And so it started to get a mind of its own. And this is where it started to get a little emoji crazy. I went from this where it was perfect, everything was good. And then because I hadn't clarified the things that I didn't want it to do and the things that I did want it to do, it decided to just randomly start adding emojis because why wouldn't? So this is where it's going to be an iterative process and it's not going to save you time. It's just going to make your courses pretty because you'll have to go in and say, oh, shoot, that's not what I wanted you to do. So please stop doing that. And if you ever mess around with the AI, it has a hard time sometimes of stopping doing things that it's already started. So occasionally I've had to just scrap it and start again with my theme because it could not get off the fact that, well, emojis are what you want in all of your themes, right? No. And then it'll just randomly pop in another color sometimes. So again, this is when I had first started and I wasn't very good at training it. I don't have that issue now because we'll talk about some of the key things to do in your training. But at the very beginning, this is what would happen quite often. The other thing, and this is where it's important to not delete and replace once you're messing around with the HTML, is I would give it a page of content and it would delete the content in there while it added the aesthetic. So I had a whole bunch of additional words in here that it decided was not important. And so it deleted it all. And I didn't realize that until I had replaced the page with a modified HTML and hit save. So that's when I did lose all of that content and had to go in and replicate it. So if you're using a holistic cut and paste approach, and we'll look in that difference in a second, always make sure and paste it in the HTML above because it'll delete it. So we can see some of the different examples here. And we went even more emoji happy here. And then here's, of course, another theme applied. And we can have the different banners and then the different color cards. And we're going through all of these visuals because I want you to be able to see what are some of the options for you to ask for as you're training the HTML. And as it goes a little bit, if you're not good at training it with these are all how I started with, I call it the theme gone wild. It was a little bit too much. And so we had to go and clarify, no, I don't want these cards in here, all of those types of examples. So it is a completely iterative process and you're having to go back and forth. And a lot of this came because I didn't take the time. We looked at that step 2 of deciding what is it exactly I wanted in my course? It was just giving the hex codes to AI and say, do this for me without having a clear structure in my head of what I wanted to do. This is not what my courses look like now, but it took me some messing around time to figure out, okay, I need to have a cohesive theme on the things that I want and I don't want. Otherwise, you get things like this, and it takes it in its own hands to create those things. So then you start refining the instructions. So here is we can refine those instructions of, okay, I want the images to have a border around it and I want to alternate the images. You can see right here, alternate the images left and right wrapping. Those are the types of specifics as you are going through and thinking about that application in our step 2. Those are the specifics that you want to train the AI to replicate. And further refinement, we get to things like tables. And here is where those accessibility instructions become super important. When you're providing the AI with tables to apply those aesthetics, having it remain accessible is one of the key points that you need to make sure and tell it. Now, any of the accessibility errors will also be picked up and fixed with the Canvas native accessibility checker and the Pope Tech. So it's really, really handy to do that. One thing that I forgot to mention that I did initially was one of my first things is I created simple module headers, and I really liked doing that. Even if I ran out of time to do any of the other aesthetics, I'll go through and create a module header with this banner, and I'll show you creating the templates in just a second for that because it allows students to know which module they're in. Because sometimes you can click through and they can go to a different module and not even realize it. So I've created those module headings, and when I do my notepad, I create that. And different things like putting videos in a table and making sure they're accessible and your table's formatted correctly. But you can use AI to create a formatting that's a lot more visually appealing in your course by giving it those instructions. I'm just going to look at a few more examples. So you see again, we've got this alternating left and right wrapping of the text. Those are the types of instructions you have. We have the videos that are embedded in the tables. Those are the types of instructions to have. Okay, so what's the process? We saw all these examples. We started with, okay, here is the process in my head, my planning process. How do I go about actually using the AI to do this in my course? I've gone back and forth, and I finally settled on using just a regular chat window in an AI versus training a bot. I trained a bot in the past and be able to preload all this different information, all the elements. But what the difference is between a bot and chat is that a bot doesn't let you see the history. So I've gone to just regular chat window. If you don't know the differences between those two things, then put it out of your head and just use the chat. If you've played around with bots, that's why I wouldn't train a bot for this particular experience. Okay. So here's now we get to the two different ways to implement this process. You can do a template and create different HTML template versus the holistic creating in the GPT. So what you're looking at in front of you is a screenshot of Notepad. That's the element that I use to be able to cut and paste those HTMLs. So here is what the HTML looks like. And I'll put an enroll code towards the end for a beginning HTML and Canvas course that I highly recommend going through before you jump into this so you can modify the HTML. But here is the different HTML templates that I created. And what those templates will look like when I plug them in. So right, oops, let's see. Uh, Sorry. So we have like right here a template for the module banner, and that's what it would look like in Canvas. So that's one of the other things that I've done is just taken a page either in a sandbox course or wherever you want. It's an unpublished page and look to see what those HTMLs look like in Canvas to be able to see what color scheme actually looks like, how those directions are going to be spit out of the AI, because you want to see what it looks like in the Canvas course. So all of these templates right here, so you can see I have them labeled in the notepad so I know what they're called. This is what they all look like in Canvas. And it can be beneficial to see how the color theme manifests itself, the different elements that you might want to do. Like create. So this is the one where the objectives that I really like to have. So that's what those different templates will look like in Canvas. And it's beneficial. Again, the color theme is a big thing, so you can see what it looks like, what the gradient looks like, created the rounded corners. This is all stuff that you had to have an advanced coding degree in to figure out how to do, but AI figures out those things for you. And here you have the same, so we've got the same elements with the other theme. You see how different it can be applied with a different theme. And we have these different hashtags here because what I had done is I took just this template that I had created for one of my course that had the colors. I put it into AI, said change this whole theme to these hex codes. And so this is what it produced. It was basically did a good job. I had a couple things that I needed to edit because you have these little hashtags, but for the most part, it easily changed this theme that I had taken the time to create to this theme. Does the difference between looking at this and how not difference, how this translates to this? I know it's overwhelming if you haven't messed around to HTML. I'm trying to make it so it's not overwhelming. Are the elements that I can clarify? Okay. All right. This is this is the fun part of my job. So absolutely, if you're from Reedley College, we can sit down and do this. And if you're from the other colleges, sit down with your instructional designers to be able to go through this. I can guarantee they would absolutely love to do this part of their job with you. So don't feel like you have to stand alone. You can go and do this with your IDs on your campuses. Okay. So, what does this look like if we do a holistic cut and paste? And what I mean by that is by taking the entire page that you want to modify in Canvas and putting that into your trained AI, because we've given it to the hex codes, we've decided all the elements that we want to do. Now we've got a plain old page in Canvas that I want to see how you just apply those. So, we're going to look at some of the examples on the differences and how it handles all those things. So here is just a random page. I've got some videos, I've got some tables. If you're going to, and I took a deep breath because I'm trying to make it so I'm not using too much technical jargon. If you want to take, and even if you're going to apply different elements, you're going to have to dive into the HTML in Canvas. There's no way to get around applying these different aesthetics without diving into the HTML. Applying it small chunks, it makes it a little bit easier. So that's what we're going to dive into right now is we're going to look over into the HTML and grab it from there. So I'm going to go to Edit. Am I sharing a Canvas page? Maybe I should say that. I made the assumption that you guys were jumping with me to the things
Yeah,
I was sharing.
you're
Okay.
good. It's just
Okay.
tiny, but I don't know if it
Okay.
matters.
Well, I don't want it to be tiny for people. Is that helpful? Is
Yes.
that helpful if I do that? Okay. All right. So I hit edit in Canvas. And now this little, I know there's an official term, but the two carrots eating each other is the unofficial way I describe it. I'm going to click on that. And that's the universal sign for code. I know it probably has a different thing, but my brain goes, that means there's a code I can get to. I'm going to be super embarrassed if there's computer science people here that are just shaking their head at me. So, but that's the universal sign for code for people that aren't computer sciences. So we can dive in right here and we see the HTML. For the sake of this presentation, I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but I'm going to show you the different ways that we can apply the theme. So I'm going to take this whole code and I'm going to plug it into my AI that I've trained with my theme. Again, remember that I've given it the hex codes, I've given it the instructions on what I want it to do with images, what I want it to do with headings and videos and all those types of things. So I want to see what it does holistically applying it to a page. So I'm just going to do Control A if you're on a non-Fruit computer, so non-Apple computer. I don't know what it is for all, but I wanted to select all. And then I just do Control C, so it's copying it. And now I'm going to go over and I have a pre-trained AI right here. So you can tell that I've been already using it. So it's already pre-trained. If I had to drag this up, you see I've had lots of different conversations and training on it. So I'm going to give it,
Make it
oh,
bigger so we can see.
okay. Yep. Better. Okay. So you can see I've had lots of conversations, gone back and forth. So I've already pre-trained it. So for the most part, once you've trained it, you don't need to provide it additional instructions. I've had it delete my content way too much. And I always start with telling it, here's another page, apply our theme. Please, I like to be nice because when they take over the world, I want it to remember that I'm nice. Please do not delete or modify content. If you ever want to know how to go to the next line without hitting enter because it'll submit things, it's just shift enter. I'm sure you all figured that out much sooner than I did. It took me a long time to realize that. So Control V. So I've just pasted it right there. Remember, I grabbed that HTML. Where did I grab it? From here. And then I just pasted it and give it a second. Depending on how big the page is, sometimes if it's a very big page, it will refuse to give you the whole HTML. They said it's too much, so you have to break it up. I intentionally chose a smaller page so it'll hopefully replicate the whole page, applying our theme. And I had to check, this is my infant toddler class, so you get to see the beautiful pink and purple. The longer it takes for me, the better I feel about it because I know that it is not just producing something and it's taking its time to review the theme and apply it how I want to. So we've got my HTML right here. So I take this little copy code button, and I'm using Google Gemini, by the way. And I I do pay for the pro version of Google Gemini. I can't remember how much it is, but it seems to do better with coding. I've had problems with GPT. I think it's better. I know a colleague uses Chat GPT and it doesn't have any problems. This is Google Gemini that I'm using. All right, copy code. So I'm going to go back over now into my Canvas course. So here is where I was saying, recommending don't just paste over the HTML, because when you do that, if it's not right, you end up having to go through this process again. So I just go hit enter a few times and then Control V, which is going to paste that HTML right in there. I hit my little code sign right there. And now I can see here is what it created for that. Let me just blow it up right here. Did it blow up? Can you guys see it? Is it bigger? No? Okay. Am I sharing it at the very least?
Yes.
Okay. I thought it got bigger. Let me share it again, maybe. I thought it was bigger. So right here at the top, you can see here is the modified HTML, and here is the original HTML. Not the original, yeah, the original content. So we can see the differences right here. Now, what do you notice? Probably Sally's the only one that'll notice because she's the only child development person. It deleted content. I told it explicitly not to delete content, and it deleted content. So that's why you don't just delete everything in there, because despite it acknowledging and saying, oh, yes, you're right to be cautious, it deleted my flippin' content in my tables. So this is where it will take you extra time. That's why I did a disclaimer. It can be fun, but you do have to sit and double check it. And now this is if you do a holistic whole page. So sometimes when I'm feeling adventurous or lazy, I try and do the whole page and see if it'll obey and not cause me issues. 9 times out of 10, I still end up having to do smaller chunks. And you can see right here, now I have to redo it because here's the table and here is how it replicated it. Okay. So that was just kind of the things that can happen when you do the whole thing. But it did the video really good. And I loved how it did these different buttons for the transcript. You guys see what happened there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you show some, I don't know if you're going to show this, but some of the instructions that you put in at first while you were training it?
Sure. You want me to show it right now, or let me do
Yeah,
a cut and paste so we can
yeah.
show the difference between cut and paste. And then we can do instructions. I'll make sure and get to that though. All right. So here's also where it's good to save it at different iterations, because now I can just push cancel and say, all right, you don't listen, so we don't want to do that anymore. So there are different ways if you're not going to do where you do a holistic cut and paste the whole page, which if you have complicated things such as a table or a video, I don't recommend doing the whole page um, because you saw what happened. But what you can also do is you can take and apply different elements of that template or even different small pieces from the HTML and apply them and put those in your AI and see the difference. I'm also going to put this in roll code in. I do recommend before you start messing around nope, I don't want to show in the HTML, you get a little bit of familiarity with it. It doesn't mean you need to become, I've lost the chat. I'll have to put it in the chat later because the chat has disappeared. Um, you don't need to be an expert, but in order to modify and avoid a lot of frustration, it's really beneficial to learn some of the different ways that the code works. I've created one based off of some other brilliant people in Canvas that shared it in the Canvas Commons that you can easily enroll in. Oh, I found the chat. There you go. That's ADHD in action for you guys. So let's look at what it would look like if we took that same page and broke it down, either cutting and pasting smaller elements into the AI or applying the template. So let's take it where we apply, just cut and paste smaller elements of it. So the first thing I like to do is I'll create spaces in the HTML so that way I can see where I want to cut and paste. So I'm going to do everything before that table. So I simply just do a bunch of enter and I'll show you what that looks like in the code. So this is what HTML looks like for spaces. So you can see visually how easy it is for me to just cut and paste those elements. So because I've created those spaces, I can just copy this part right here. And I go back over. It's switched over to Gemini, right? Thank you, Katrina. And so I just pasted it right there. And it should be quicker because it's a smaller amount. This is where I usually get distracted going on Facebook while I'm thinking about it, but that would be unprofessional if I did that right now. All right. So wait for it to finish generating. Copy. I'm going to go back over here. I still don't want to completely replace it because I trust it more doing smaller elements, but I'll go up and see. All right. Here we have a better representation. Looks like everything's there. So now I feel confident I can delete this part that's in there. And now I'm going to see how it does with a table. So same thing, create that space. So go back into the code. A table is going to be much longer, but I see, okay, here's the start of my table because I put that space in there. Go down, and here's the bottom. It might look a little bit different depending on what formatting is stuck behind there, but you want to look for this NBSP. That's going to let you know that's where the space is. So I'm simply going to take it, do my Control C, go back over to Gemini. I like to provide some additional information. Even though I've trained it, I feel it's always beneficial to remind it. This is a table. Please apply our theme. Don't delete content. Make sure it's screen reader accessible. And if there's anything additional you want to add, if you want to give it a different hex code, whatever it might be, but if I'm doing a video or an image, I like to remind it, even though it knows how to read code, this is the table, blah, 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 whatever it might be. Okay, I'm give it my table. And it's going to think if you want to provide more instructions, especially with a table, I wanted to have alternating color, banded rows, don't apply color, only put color in the headers. These are the things that as you start messing around with it more, you'll know, I want to clarify this. I don't like the look of it. It's that step two that we looked about at the beginning of the conversation of here are the things that the theme I want to carry through my entire course, the elements that I want to have consistent. Copy the code, go back over into my course. Remember, I don't want to delete that. Control V. And here we go. Here's our table. So it does a much better job. I'm trying to make sure it didn't delete the content. And sometimes I'm not sure if it did. It's different formatting. So I'll just go down to the table and just to be sure, just paste it in there. And it looks like it did. Because I don't want to take the time to figure it out. But that's one, and we're going back to emojis. I think you guys are bad luck because I had trained it to not do emojis anymore. But you see how I'm just cutting and pasting down from the other element so I can make sure it doesn't delete that. I, I have no idea why it consistently enjoys deleting the content, but that's just something to be very aware of. It does enjoy deleting the content. I think it's because it thinks you're smarter. It's smarter than us. That one looks okay. All right. So now I can delete this table. And you can go through and do the different element. Let's just do the video real quick so we can see the different things that we can tell it to do. Same thing, I'm creating my space. go down, grab my video, copy. Let's tell it to, can you left wrap the text and put the video on a color from our theme around it. That didn't make any sense. Let's see what it does to it. Thinking, thinking, thinking. And then we'll see what it looks like to apply the template. Going piece by piece on the page can be just as quick as applying the template. I've gone back and forth on which one I like, and I'll show you what I mean by when I say apply the template. Okay, so we're going to copy the code, go back to our course. Remember not to delete that. And what I haven't done that I should have been doing is saving between each of these iterations, because now, since I haven't saved, if this one is messed up, I have to cancel it, and all of the things that I've done previously, I'll have to redo. So that's one thing that I should have demonstrated better than I did. But I would go and save this. So you have right here, it did the left wrap of the text. It put it on a theme, the color of our theme of our course. And I've got the little buttons right here. I didn't tell it to, but previously that's what we had established as our theme. So now, if I want to be able to apply the templates that I have, let's stick with this page for the sake of time. So I'm going to get rid of my spaces. And I have a couple of templates that I always like to apply to each one of my courses. I talked about the banner that goes up top. I also have a footer that I like to put down below, and I found it's easier just to apply those templates. So I'm going to open up my notepad. I'm going to bring it over here, and hopefully I can share it real quick. Let's see. See if it lets me. All right. All right. You guys see, so this is Notepad. Thank you. So I have all of the different notepads created for my different courses. You can see them up here. I have them labeled so that I know where I can easily find it. So right here, I have my module header banner. So this is, I've created this beforehand. It's definitely way too much to go into for the sake of this workshop, but I've created this using AI to create this template. So I'm going to copy this and then go back. Actually, let's save this real quick. Practice what I preach here. I'm going to save that so that those are solid if I mess this up. Go back to edit. Okay, let me share my canvas again because I just forgot it wasn't. All right, here we go. So I've copied that template that I created from Notepad. Do my little code symbol. I want to put this at the top because it's my module header. So I can just simply push enter, Control V. Oh, apparently I didn't copy that. So let me just copy it. I went back over to my notepad and copied it. There we go. So I can see I've copied it, hit the code again, and now we have my module header and I've applied that template. So I'll put this is orientation module. Start here, whatever it might, the name of the module. I like to have that consistent. The other template I like to have is the footer at the bottom. I go back over to my notepad. I'm gonna scroll down a lot of times because I have so many templates. I'll just do Control F and find my footer. I'm copying it from my template. Go back over to my Canvas page. I'm back in my code. Scroll to the bottom. And now I've applied that template right there. And you can see that gradient color that I created. Save. Oops. Save. Let's do one more. So if I'm looking at this and I want to change some of the other elements, so I like to have my headings, as we were talking about, with a different color behind them. I just like the way that looks sometimes. I know this is a lot of purple and pink, but it's just the fun theme. So I just embraced it very fully. So I'm going to go back over because I want to create that heading banner. Oh, I only have 8 more minutes. So let me just show it real quick. Okay. So you see I have my heading banner up here. This is the heading 2. So I have it labeled heading 2. I'm going to copy it again, go back over to my Canvas course. Here is where it's going to get tricky. And this is why I highly recommend going and just breezing through that HTML Canvas course. Because we have AI, a lot of the elements that has you create and mess with the HTML isn't necessary, but it lets you know what these mean. So right here, I found this H3. I grabbed an H2 heading, but these H3, this is letting the screen reader know. So if you've taken the accessibility courses, this is what we're always talking about for having those heading styles in the HTML. This lets me know that there's a heading there. This is telling me here's where that box that's around it starts, because I have this code that's got this backslash on the divider. So whoops, in order to be inside the box, I need to make sure and be underneath it. So I've just pasted my heading title right there. So that's what that would look like right here. Now I want to show you if I had messed up and I put that heading outside of the box right here, here's where it's going to go. Now the great thing is if I mess up and I put it both, I can delete it right from here. So right here, I'm going to cut and paste, put it here. Whoops, sometimes it does that. And now I've got my heading that's in here. I'm going to check my accessibility because there's something up. My table doesn't have a caption. Check that. We check our canvas. We check our Pope-Tech. Oh, I thought that should be a heading too. So if you don't run your Pope-Techs, perfect. Just like me. There we go. And now we've got a page that is aesthetic, much more aesthetically pleasing. And you saw the different elements. All right. So let's go and let's look at my words. I should open this up and think. I hate Mozilla's scroll bar. So I'm going back to Gemini. I'm trying to get to the top. Let me share real quick, make sure I'm on Gemini. Am I sharing Gemini? Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, I hate Mozilla's little scroll bar. Any questions while I try to get to the top of this very extensive chat? Because Lori asked me to.
I've got a quick question. Do
Yep.
you only design your pages thinking how they are on the desktop, or do you also look at the phone and compare and try to make changes?
Because Canvas is natively mobily responsive, I don't have to think about that. So as long as I put everything on a Canvas page, it's going to be responsive. So whether or not whatever I'm doing to the aesthetics, it's going to modify it for a cell phone. And whether it's the aesthetics or not, like that's so let me backtrack. Yes, I do think of it. I don't like to have big padding or big borders because of that, because it shrinks down, it's going to make it where there's less text that are available. So yes, I do think of it, but I don't have to overly think about it because I don't like those things anyway. That kind of makes sense. But it's one of the reasons that I cut and paste and put everything on Canvas, because Canvas will make it natively mobily responsive. So as I'm trying to get to the top of this, what I'll start out with Canvas, not Canvas, with whatever AI I'm using is just to start by putting in the hex codes and say I'm creating an aesthetic template for my course. Of course, I'm going to the top of this and it's probably not going to be one that I want to show sometimes. Okay, here we go. So here's the top. So I've started out with the template that I've already created. And see, I knew this wouldn't be a good one, but I had already that HTML in there and I wanted to modify it so that it had rounded corners. So it produced my modified heading, rounded corners. And then I wanted to create a gradient. So can I further modify it? So it's gradient to a lighter purple on one end. So what I'm doing right here is I'm creating my new template. And because it can remember all of these conversations, it's going to create that theme for me as I'm creating my template. So this was a new course. I was creating the template. And we have all of the different variations. Let's see. And I'm giving it the old codes that I'm wanting to modify for the template.
Hey, Amanda, Kenneth had a
Mhm.
question. Where can you find more training like advanced techniques with Canvas?
Um, uh, advanced techniques with Canvas. Meet with your ID on your campus. Google it. I know it's out there. Being specific with Canvas, I don't know. And I would even recommend just trial and error. If you have a familiarity with the technology, I think you're going to get more out of it just by doing trial and error, meeting with your campus ID. Kenneth, I think you're at Fresno City. Sue is great. Sit down and meet with her. If you come teach for us, and I'd love to meet with you as well. So, but I don't know of any trainings off the top of my head that are Canvas specific.
He's got Madera.
Oh, I could probably help you then since they're without an ID right now. All right. Oh, I guess we're pretty much at time. I know that was really quick and I didn't show you the prompt as thoroughly as I should have. Um, Going through those steps that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, that's what you're going to relay to the AI. So here is the color gradient that I want. Here is what I want you to do with my images. Here is what I want you to do. And within that AI, you're going to create that template. And then I highly recommend those codes that it spits out for you, put those on whatever software you're going to use. I use Notepad. Lori says she uses Sticky. You can even put it on Word. I'm not saying that you can't. It just can create some wonkiness. I think it's gotten better, but that is the process that you're going to go through in your training is that process we looked at the beginning of the presentation of thinking through here are the color theme that I want. This is what I want to apply. And even if you think through that at the beginning, you're still going to have lots of modifications because as you see what it looks like on the page, you'll go, "Ooh, that's not what I thought it was going to look like." And it's going to be a trial and error back and forth on what you want it to apply. But like I said, you're not going to save any time. You're going to spend, I don't even know, I can't even tell you how many hours this weekend I spent just doing the aesthetics. But it's fun. So I'm always cautious when I start talking about this, is that it's a fun rabbit trail to go down.
Someone
All
has
right, Lori, I
a
think I'm at
question.
time. So.